This is the parry. You have probably seen it before, as it is a mechanic in many games, and in a lot of them it is one of the main mechanics. Often performing a parry requires good timing. This creates an issue with designing a parry system, as there must be an equal risk to reward. What I mean is that even though a parry might feel satisfying, it still won't feel rewarding unless you get a good enough effect from the parry that would make the risk of trying to parry worth it. If a parry has extremely tight timing and gives very little risk to reward, then I'd argue there would be no point in using the parry in the first place. So ideally, a parry in a game should have an even 50-50 risk to reward. I'm now going to look at 6 games with parry systems and see if they meet this criteria, and also any other critiques or things I like about these parry systems. 3 of these games have a focus on parrying, and 3 have parries but don't necessarily focus on parrying. I'm going to start with games that don't focus on parrying, the first of which I'd like to talk about being Metroid Dread. But before that, we must understand how parries work. If a hitbox from an enemy attack collides with your player character's hitbox and you do nothing to stop it, then you'll get punished, most of the time that punishment being losing health and getting closer to death. But instead, if you time a button input to parry just before an attack hits your player character, then you get to punish the enemy. In most games, looking at you Sonic Frontiers, you can still mistime a parry and have the enemy attack you. This happens if the frame you press the parry button does not match up with the frame the enemy attacked. Let's call these frames damage frames. Now there are also frames where you won't get hit as a result of parrying at the right time. Let's call these safe frames. So if an enemy attack hitbox lines up with your character's hitbox during a safe frame, you will do a parry. In a game that runs at 30 frames per second with 5 safe frames, that will look something like this. If, for example, the hitbox lines up with your character's hitbox after a safe frame, then you will still take damage. Now that we understand this, I'll now go back to talking about Metroid Dread. If an attack starts shining white, you can press X to parry it. Now you have the opportunity to shoot the enemy, and once you have defeated them, you can get a lot more health and ammo compared to if you were to fight them normally. They actually call this a melee counter, but it is pretty much identical to parries in most other games. This parry doesn't have very hard timing, and I found that the audio makes it really easy to pull this off. With the number of resources that you get from doing this parry, it sometimes makes it feel too overpowered, and I ended up using this a lot. Because of this, I feel that this parry is designed not too well, as the reward far outweighs the risk. However, one thing that I think this parry is designed well for is the enemies. These enemies can kill Samus very easily, and the only options are to run or hide. As soon as one catches Samus, she is unable to escape. Well, unless you recognize that the enemy have the same shine as an enemy attack. Then you can parry it to get away. This has very tight timing, however. It is one of the only ways to avoid death once you have been spotted by one of the enemy. Because of this, I think this parry is used very well here as a last-ditch method to get away. The enemy invoke fear and are supposed to be scary. The game is called Metroid Dread after all. So having the only way to escape once they have caught you being to press a button at a very specific time, that being a total of 8 frames, really shows the player how scary these enemies really are. This reminded me of parrying Guardians in Breath of the Wild, where Guardians are difficult to defeat without parrying. Speaking of which, if you hold out your shield and press A at the right time, Link will move his shield forward and parry an attack. This parry stuns enemies and makes them drop their weapons, letting you pick them up. In addition to this, it will not use any durability on your shield, whereas blocking normally would use durability. The timing is pretty easy to get, but I don't find this parry to be too useful. Using a backflip or side hop is better against most attacks, as the game will give you what's called a flurry rush. This stops time, letting you attack an enemy a bunch. The reason why I don't like the parry compared to a flurry rush is because the flurry rush gives a better reward for timing it right. The only time I really find it more useful to parry is when I need an enemy's weapon or don't have any weapons of my own to use. It basically acts as a thunder attack in a way, as it both stuns the enemy and makes them drop their weapon. However, some attacks do not give the player the option to flurry rush. With Guardian Beams, dodging does not give a flurry rush, but instead parrying a beam attack sends the beam back at the target, effectively making the enemy damage itself. This is very useful against Guardians as it basically means you can beat them with a pot lid. This is also effective against boss fights when bosses use beam attacks. Speaking of bosses, after defeating Fireblight Ganon, Link unlocks Daruk's Protection. This ability has 3 uses before it must recharge and will automatically parry any attack as long as ZL is held down. Now normally I would not discuss an ability that lets you no skill a parry 3 times, but the reason why I bring this up is because of a glitch known as Daruk's Perfect Parry. If you let go of ZL within 2 frames after getting attacked, then Daruk's Protection will activate but will not use the charge. Now you may be asking me why a parry glitch that has fewer safe frames than a normal parry would ever be useful, and to that I respond with this clip. If you use Daruk's Protection to parry an attack after side hopping, then you can trick the game into thinking that you dodged an attack. Now doing this using Daruk's Perfect Parry, you can essentially get a free flurry rush whenever you want with no limit other than being hard to perform. This can be useful when you want to get a flurry rush, but the enemy does not do an attack that you can flurry rush. Even though this is a glitch that I can barely perform myself, I honestly think it has a better risk to reward ratio than a normal parry because of it giving instant flurry rushes. It makes me wish that the normal parry in this game was a little harder to time. If you press the left trigger with a parry Astral equipped, right before an enemy attacks, the Tarnish will move their shield forward and cause the enemy to stay in a staggered position. Now the Tarnish can take a riposte to do a lot of damage, but bosses may need to be parried a couple times to get a riposte. This makes the parry a lot more balanced because if you could riposte a boss in one parry, then you could get lucky and beat a boss with nothing but good timing. Parrying has to be built as a core part of your character's build. I don't normally use shields in Souls games, and to be honest, this video is the first time I've tried to make a build that relied on parrying. Not every attack in the game can be parried. Of course, Elden Ring's combat system was designed around rolling, and parrying would be way too overpowered if every attack could be parried. You also do not get many safe frames to parry, which makes this quite risky. I think this is to the benefit of the game, as doing a parry can lead to such a big reward. One thing that I like about parries in this game is the fact that there are multiple types of parries. So if you think that the parry window on a regular parry is really hard to time, then you could get the golden parry or the buckler parry that have more safe frames. Souls games have always been about skill, but more so they have been about knowledge. Considering this, I think having multiple parries in this game is very well implemented, as it means that people who go out of their way to research or mess around with the parries will be rewarded for doing so. There is one Souls game that primarily focuses on parrying, that being Sekiro. If you press the left bumper, Wolf will move the Kusibimaru in front of himself and parry. If you continue to hold down the bumper, he will go into a standard blocking position, which can still deflect an attack, but you will gain more posture damage than if you were to parry normally. If you take too much posture damage, Wolf will be stunned for a moment. You see, the goal in beating an enemy in Sekiro is to perform a death blow. There are 2 ways to get a death blow. The first and most simple method is to get an enemy's health to 0. The second way is to build up the enemy's posture bar so that they end up in the same staggered state that you see the wolf in when his posture bar is full. To fill up an enemy posture bar, you can jump on them, attack them, Makiri counter them, which is an ability on the skill tree, and of course you can parry. Notably, the standard block will only fill up Wolf's posture bar. Bosses need to take 2 death blows to be defeated. If you are aiming to just deal normal damage and beat a boss like that, it will often be slower, which makes this harder, as you will need to last longer in the fight, meaning that you will have to use a lot more healing gods. But with the posture damage method, you can get a death blow much faster, as almost everything can build up posture. This also means that you have to stay extremely aggressive, as the posture bar can heal over time. So the reward for using parries in this game is not only to avoid taking damage, but it also lets you use the enemy's posture bar to defeat them. Being able to just constantly attack an enemy also comes at the risk of the enemy attacking the player. The only way to avoid this is by parrying. The parry has a lot of safe frames, but this is a good thing considering that most of the time, you want to parry every attack that you see. The reason why I say most of the time is because there are some attacks that you can't parry, which is indicated by this red symbol. On thrusting attacks, you can Mercury counter or just avoid the attack. On sweeping attacks, you can jump on the enemy or just again avoid the attack. And on a grab attack, your only option is to avoid the attack. There are also lightning attacks that you can intentionally take damage from, so that you can jump up into the lightning and send it back to your opponent. Adding these types of attacks was one of the best things they could have done, as without it this game would have become very repetitive and you would just parry everything. So in short, Sekiro gives a big reward for parrying but requires the player to parry multiple times to get this reward, which is why I think it is a good thing that it has quite a lot of safe frames. If you press the F key, then V1 will punch and parry an attack, sending the damage back to the enemy and healing V1 completely. This parry isn't very hard to perform, but because Ultrakill is a very fast-paced game, I think this is a good thing. Most of the time, there aren't many opportunities to get a parry, so making it easy to do is a good idea. In a way, parrying projectiles just acts as another way to shoot, with an added healing effect, but you can only do it if an attack is coming towards you. The reason I say this is because when you parry a projectile, you send an explosion back in the direction that you're facing. This explosion is similar to the explosions from a malicious rail cannon and the alt fire of the core eject shotgun. This does a lot of damage, and it can often make it significantly easier to take down enemies. But another thing that Ultrakill adds to its parrying system is letting you parry your own attacks. When using the shotgun, you can do what's called a projectile boost. If you parry your own shot, then you can send an explosion flying towards an enemy. Shotguns in games normally work better at closer range, as when you shoot one, the projectiles will spread out, so if you shoot one up close, then you'll have most pellets hit the enemy. But the projectile boost basically lets you do this at range, and because this is an explosion, it does not require the best aim. Moreover, you can also parry the coins from the marksman revolver. I don't find this to be nearly as useful as other parries in this game, as to perform it, you either need to wait a while, or do this weird setup where you move backwards, then forwards to parry it. Whilst it does do more damage than normally just shooting a coin, it is easier to shoot 2 coins in the same time that it takes to parry one. Although I do acknowledge that if used correctly, parrying coins can lead to some incredible results. I just find it easier to shoot coins the normal way. The final game I'd like to talk about is Nine Souls. If you right click or press the left bumper on controller, E will move his hand forward and parry. By design, Nine Souls takes a lot from Sekiro. It has the same easy timing and instant invulnerability that makes its combat system rely on parrying. But the key way Nine Souls differentiates itself from Sekiro is the fact that it is 2D. In 2D, it is much easier to recognize an attack. This turns Nine Souls into a rhythm game, or at least a rhythm game where you brutally kill bosses. Every single attack that you see in this game can be avoided. This is a very interesting way to use a parry because even though it may not look like it, the game forces you to learn every boss's pattern to avoid getting damaged and eventually dying. The coolest thing about this game is the fact that if you do not know how to avoid every attack from a boss, it will feel almost impossible to beat. But if you do, it becomes very easy and you could probably do it with taking little to no damage. Nine Souls doesn't have a posture bar, but what it does have is Qui. Every time you parry in this game, you gain a dot next to your health bar. This is Qui and you use it to perform these spells. Some of the different types of parries can build up internal damage on your enemies. You can also have this build up if the player has bad parry timing and will need to wait for it to heal or parry correctly to heal a little. But if Yi uses one of these 3 spells, he can turn any internal damage on his enemies into real damage. Mix this with things such as the Hedgehog Jade that deals internal damage on every parry, and now Yi can use these spells to do huge amounts of damage. So in Nine Souls, the parry not only grants Yi invincibility, but it also grants Qui, which can be used to deal a lot of damage. Parries are a crucial part of many games and their combat systems. Without the parry, many of the games that we play today would be a lot worse. Whether that means the games would have less player freedom, be changed completely, or have different content, there is no denying that games would change without this mechanic. So next time you play a game that has parries, just think about how much time and effort the developers spent just perfecting the mechanics that make the parry so good. Well, unless you're playing Sonic Frontiers, that is.